Call the meeting of the Lakeville Historical Commission to order. And is anybody recording besides Lake Camp?
We have your name.
Eric Anderson.
Thank you.
What, I mean, I'm just reading this for the first time here, so sorry.
Okay. It happens when you don't have email.
You want to explain things?
Okay, the Lakeville Historical Commission has requested a meeting with the Town Administrator, Ari Sky, Town Planner, Mark Resnick, and Building Commissioner, Nate Darling, to discuss a number of projects that we have been involved with over the few years and to try and get some movement on some that we have not been successful with. So the first one is to determine how to proceed with the capital expenditures projects at previous town meetings, including discussion and possible vote on historical and archaeological assets survey in Lakeville, a National Register listing and preservation plan for Thompson Hill Cemetery, and a town archaeological survey map and presentation plan. So that's the first thing.
Mark, come up to the... So these were approved at several town meetings, 2019 and 2021. Separate articles. The National Register listing and preservation plan was for $10,000, approved in June 2019. The Historic and Archaeological Assets Survey was $25,000, approved in June 2019. And then the Archaeological Survey and Preservation, Archaeological Survey Map and Preservation Plan was $30,000, and that was approved in May of 2021. To my knowledge, there's been no movement on these. We're ready to help and support any way we can. If you want some guidance from us, really for some guidance on how you want to proceed on this, and we'll be ready to support.
What Mass Historical has told us before is that we need to have our survey comprehensive, and that's sort of a vague term. However, I was able to find out that Sherburne has a comprehensive community survey project, and they did an abstract and then talked about the 4 phases of it. They actually had Jessica Rowcroft of the Mass Historical Commission come down and actually talk to them about it.
Okay.
So the phases include, phase 1 is a survey project provided for submission of proposed base map for recording locations of historical resources. This is for Sherburne. 2 is required submission of list of areas and properties to be surveyed, outline of narrative history and sample inventory forms. Phase 3 involved completing a draft inventory form, narrative history, and list of possible projects for National Register of Historic Places. And the 4th one was concluded with the final drafts, and then the final report was submitted. So it's a 22-page report. So I've just copied out the first 2 pages.
This would tie to which of these 3, or is it all 3?
This would be for the first thing. The first thing we have to do is make our historical information comprehensive for them. So this would be assumed they wanted another town to do it, so I'm sure it's probably the same format.
Yeah.
So that's number 1. The other ones fall into place afterwards. Once we're comprehensive, then we could apply for National Historic Designation for Thompson Hill. And the archaeological survey map could come either before or after that, because it's not, it might be even factor in as being part of the comprehensive part,
Okay.
but it's not tied into National Historic,
Okay.
it's registration, designation or anything like that. So it's a comprehensive survey, the assets, archaeological and historical assets of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in Lakeville, which is what we call the survey.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the forms. But they want them updated. There's a lot of things that have changed since the 80s and 70s when these were done. And so they want things updated. Plus we need for, is it for open space? We need things that don't exist anymore. That we've had
Yes, I need
demolition.
the macros list of things that don't exist
So that's one of the
anymore.
updating things, elements we have to do too. And usually they have a Y designation on the forms,
What designation? A wide?
the letter Y.
A Y designation, okay.
I don't know why it's not
Okay.
D, demolition, or something like that.
All right. Okay, well, we can, perhaps the best thing to do would be to get a hold of the Sherburne study, survey, and then maybe, continue to connect with the commission, and see if the commission does so designates.
And I can look into Mass Historic's, this, register listing in their preservation plans and see what's required and whether I can get some assistance from them, at least have maybe someone come down. I've been able to do that before.
At one time, they used to have a list of people who actually, you paid them to do the work, and they evidently don't have that list anymore.
Is
But
that what the
there's-
concept was for these, do you think, when these articles were approved? Was that the idea that we?
They would go in and they would look at what you have, and then look at the historic sites that maybe haven't been done, and then would go ahead. We had a scenic area done, and a gentleman, what was his name? He begins with K. Oh, shoot. I can't-
Krim?
Mr. Krim came in, and he did this whole scenic designation that we have now. And it's the old Main Street and Crooked Lane and stuff around that was there. So, and they also did a place down at Clark Shores, was an old cape in there. And so he did some of those things for us, but it wasn't enough evidently.
So I assume from the structure of these articles, you were anticipating that there would be before I came along, but that they would be some kind of contracted study that you would hire, and the estimates were based on, have you gotten assessments from Serpide, from MHC, from where did the estimates for the cost of these come from?
It was an estimate. I don't know it that really.
Okay, all right, I didn't know if there's, if there, I was exploring, wondering whether there were conversations that took place with anybody about, about potential outside.
I don't think so. I think we got ballpark figures from someplace. But the thing is that some of these that were on the list of capital expenditures were on there for 10 years.
Right.
So I'm not sure how accurate the financial element is at this point.
I see what you're saying, yeah. I mean, you mean in terms of what that amount of money is, what would we need? Yeah.
Would we get as much
Yeah.
for our
Yeah.
money as we would have 10 years ago? Yeah.
There may be a possibility of certainly the first one and the second one, actually, they all kind of go together in a way.
Yeah.
At least second and third one do. I don't know the first. And, so maybe there's a way to kind of
Combining it
yeah,
to one
phase-
larger
phase it,
project, like a
phase it
phased
through that,
project, yeah.
when you're a big enough project at that point, you'd have to do an RFP, but still,
Mhm.
there might be a way.
Yeah.
So maybe what we ought to do is explore with, do you have any consultants that you've used, that you know of for this type of work? You said MHC used to do that kind of work, but they don't really anymore.
I think I'm not sure if it's the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a list of maybe what you call vendors or
Okay,
contractors.
yeah.
And I think they fall into categories, and some of their specialties, like a couple of their specialties, is the archaeological survey map, which
Mhm.
is a map that would show archaeological sites in Lakeville, not for amateur archaeologists to go in and dig, but for, in terms of development and areas that we need to be concerned about that are sensitive. And I think we found that out just recently with some property
Right.
on County Street
Right.
area.
Okay, so we'll dig into that a little bit and we'll get back to you with some ideas.
So yes, we would need contracted services because we don't, there's 5 of us, right? And we haven't really, John's done some work for us in terms of CPA
Yeah.
and writing stuff like that, and she's on open space and has done stuff for the Historical Commission that way. But none of us have
Yeah, I don't
an
think Serpide-
expertise in this area.
I don't know if Dave was a historic planner, I can check to see, but I used to know some people at Mass Historic, so
Okay.
they're probably not there anymore.
I'm sure there must be people who, in other towns who have done
I'm
this.
sure there are.
Like with the
Yeah.
information I just picked up from Sherburne.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's,
Yeah.
but I don't know what their
We had an
vanguard
historic
was
historic
like.
planner on staff in my old gig, but, New Bedford, but in Laura. This was exactly the kind of work she used to do all the time, I don't think she's available for contract hours, unfortunately. But I could probably, reach out to her and see if she probably connects with some people that would help us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's do that. Okay. All
Because
right.
one of the big things from Mass History I've been hearing and have heard for the last 10 or 15 years is they're really concerned about post-World War II materials and houses. A lot of them have been modified, but in terms of documentation, artifacts, things like that, because it's not the Civil War, the American Revolutionary War, the general public might think it's not important. And so when people are downsizing or cleaning up properties that have family
You don't look at
histories,
that as,
they're afraid that it's going to end up in the landfill unless, and we have a tendency to say, we're interested in almost anything, but please ask your family first, because we don't want to take your family's pictures or their history.
Sure.
We'll take copies.
sure.
We'll pay to have copies made, and you can have the originals and just loan them to us for a few days or something. But if no one wants it, then we would like to have the ability to hold it for the town. So we have done that with a number of people who either didn't have children and there was no one else in their family interested, and they have given us their genealogy and things like that. So that's an important aspect, but we don't know how comprehensive, if it's more than 50 years old, it's considered an antique. Does that mean houses? Are we talking, does Mass Historical want us to stop? Or do they want us to take something that was post-World War II, or something from the 60s, something from the 70s, and so on?
Yeah. Okay. All right, great, thank you. Okay.
I would just like to mention that we, over the course of the commission being in existence, we've probably done about 100 survey sheets. Most of them by in-house people in the past. So there's been a lot done in town, but it needs to be updated.
Yeah.
Who has access to those surveys?
Well, Nancy could explain
Where
better.
are they?
Well, they're on the website for the state, under the Secretary of State, under
Okay.
Mass Historical. So you can access them that way.
Mhm.
We have a copy of all of our forms in the Historic Library, in the bigger room. I have a copy, a binder for ours, which also has stuff that I've been adding, like if the house was sold and if there was someone who lived there who passed away, we've added things to that. And the museum has a copy, because you should never have just one place where everything is in case of natural disaster or something like that. So we have 3 copies, but we don't have anything on computer here, but if you can get it through the state.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll get back, we'll start to get into that, we'll get back to you.
So the archaeological survey map, I think, is one of the critical things that needs to be done, only because of land development. And, for instance, when this library was built, we had to do an archaeological dig on the Sargasso Sea, which is the little water supply area down here. And that was, by the way, was named by the Boy Scouts. Lakeville had nothing really to do with that naming. And they found that there was a summer encampment there, but they only partially dig because you always leave something for future archaeologists who have maybe better ways of looking at things. So we do know that that's a protected area, that embankment around that little pond. But so there's probably lots of other places too in Lakeville that have this, besides the places we know like Betty's Neck and some of the pond areas places. So these are things that, if we don't protect them, or if we don't at least notate where they are so people are aware of their existence, they just may disappear.
Yeah. Okay.
So going into the next one, number 2.
Go ahead, keep going.
Thank
You're
you.
doing well.
A discussion of Lakeville's first historic district of town-owned property at the intersections of Bedford Street, Main Street, and Precinct. Once our survey is comprehensive, then there's some things we can do. And one of the things that we wanted just to touch base with you on was the fact that we pretty much own, the town owns all the property in this area. Sampson Cemetery is privately owned, and the Lakeville United Church of Christ is on the Washburn House site, and that's privately owned. But everything else, Duran, the historic library, the townhouse, this building. They're all part of could be for our first historic district. And because it's only two private things, one a cemetery and one a church, then there's a good chance that the butters, the people that would be part of this district, would be willing to be part of this district. So this is one of the things we would like to do because it's intact. And other than the addition of this building, it's a newer building, which we had the architect try to make it blend in a little bit, even though it's much larger. It's here. So if we could get things going like that, then the possibility, it could be a local historic district. There's also national historic districts. They get to be a little bit more, if you get one, you can sometimes progress to another.
So you would do that after you finish the survey, or you do it?
It would be sometime within
the period.
time. Hopefully, if I were still on board. I think it's something we've talked about. We couldn't act on it. We have to. The selectmen would have to start, and with the establishment of a survey committee for a special historic district. Because although we could generate the interest and get the start, we aren't necessarily going to be on that.
Right. At least
It
the
was
town
a
meeting-
separate district committee that would oversee that property.
And I believe it's a town meeting vote as well.
Right.
Yeah.
But it would be the selectmen would have to do like a study committee, and then it would go to town meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so number 3 would be the discussion and possible vote on a historic Carnegie Lakeville Public Library ramp access.
Okay, can you do it? Next turn. Okay. So I believe you're all familiar with this.
We've talked about.
We talked about, right?
We've had.
So I believe, prior to my coming here, I believe there was a conversation about whether a ramp access to that site would be acceptable or not. But we have some renderings now, and we wanted to, run these renderings by all of you and see your reaction, gauge your reaction before deciding, as moving forward.
So number 1,
You can walk through.
Yeah, so as you know, and well, first of all, I'm really appreciative to have the opportunity to be in that building with inspectional services. We've tried to, maintain respect for the historic nature of the building, and we did as little modification work or permanent modification work as we possibly could to utilize the building. Whether, in the future, the building becomes something of just a historic nature, if we're ever able to create other accommodations at Town Hall to bring inspectional services back or not, is unclear. But we want to make sure we maintain the building with as little amount of changes as possible. But part of the town's commitment to making sure all people can access these buildings, so we've gone in and we knew we needed a bathroom, so we made sure it was ADA accessible. We also, through warrant article, had created a funding mechanism to put a ramp in. The reason why we're back here today with this ramp discussion is because we didn't want to rush it. We wanted to make sure that we did it right, we did it respectfully, and we gave the commission options prior to moving forward. So what we have here is we have 2 ramp options. The highest location on the property is at the bottom of those steps, so that's in nature the shortest ramp. So the ramp will be about 60 feet, and so the first rendering that shows a ramp, that shows it off the left side of the building. That ramp is 60 feet long with 2 landings for turn radius and rest stops, if you will. And it ends up at the bottom of the stairway. So the right-hand side of the existing stairway will still remain functional. The walkway will stay as it is, and there's no modifications to the building. This is an aluminum ramp that'll set on pads. There won't be any modifications necessary to the building with this option. So moving just forward quick, and we'll just go through them. There's a site plan showing where the location would be on it. You go to the second page of the second little packet there is a right-hand option. And what the architect had considered when giving this right-hand option is it brings you right to the handicap parking spots. which is good in theory. The only issue is it completely goes over the existing walkway, which means there won't be an option. Everybody has to go up the ramp.
The stairs are no longer functional.
The stairs are no longer functional, and the elevations near the handicap parking are that in which would create a longer ramp. So the ramp would be about 10 feet longer that way. So again, no building changes with that, but certainly I think from an optics perspective is more intrusive to the property. I think it takes away from the property. You know, I still prefer the left ramp option that we were looking at originally. But the other option, and again, this is why we wanted to be here today, there is a lift option. So if neither of these are acceptable, we could look into a lift. The couple issues with a lift that we would run into, cost, which I think is less important than, you know, maintaining the functional character of the building and aesthetics, but you're probably $90,000 to $100,000, but would have to do significant modifications. So the front entranceway, if you look at, you know, the first picture, you see a rendering of the front of the building. To the right of that entranceway, you could put a lift there and you would have to break through the wall in order to get in.
So the foyer there.
Through the foyer area.
So it would be like in the garden area?
Correct.
Going up
Yeah.
to the side of the,
Yeah.
You have to punch a hole in the
Porch.
foyer, right?
Porch.
Yeah. Porch, thank you, yeah.
Yeah, and you know,
do
Nancy,
some of your windows,
you
too.
guys are very familiar with that building. I mean, this is a 24-inch thick masonry wall,
Mm-hmm.
you know, granite and everything else, and the width of that foyer is only about 42, 46 inches. So from an ADA perspective, you really don't have the width to go in there. Now, I can't speak for the folks up in Boston, but when they're looking at ADA requirements, as you get better, right, we're not gonna get a violation for not being fully compliant. We've had legal opinion in the past that the building was built, it was in public use, it's always been in public use. You don't necessarily need to meet this standard. We're doing it because, as many of you know, we're trying to do the right thing, right? And the select board and RE are also supporting that. We might not be required to do this ramp and make it ADA accessible, but it is the right thing. So, like I said, we're before you just to get a little bit of feedback, and you know, we can get pricing on a lift option, but it would definitely, you know, cause disturbance to the building.
So which option are you recommending?
I'm recommending the left ramp option. It's the shortest amount of ramp. It won't deteriorate the look of the front quite as much by going the whole stretch over to the handicap parking. It'll maintain the existing sidewalk that goes to the front of the building. You'll still have the option to use the stairs if you'd like. But the important piece, it also gives you the ramp option right at the bottom of the stairs. So it could even be, you know, a lot of times we think of wheelchairs and stuff like that, but you know, you have an employee and they go in for a knee surgery and now they have a walker or a crutches or stuff like that. Or, you know, a younger kid, those are quite the set of steps to navigate even for anyone.
Bend your knees.
Yeah. So I'm recommending the left ramp option. I think it's the best for the commission. I think it's the best for the building, and I do think it's the best for the residents.
I have a question about the current stairs. What condition are they in?
So the stairs themselves, and you know, you've seen the historic pictures, they weren't like that. So the stairs were never square down off the building. They were pyramid in design. So there was a small step on the top, and they tiered down so you could walk up three sides of those steps of the original design of Carnegie when he did that. The stairs themselves are in perfect shape. There's no cracking in the stairs. The two sidewalls have been spalled, but those aren't the original anyway. But the mortar joints are spalled, the cement is cracked. We did get a local contractor, mason, out there to look at them. He said the whole top would need to be changed. We were ready to go on that. I got ramp estimates, and a ramp company came out to look at it and said, don't do that yet, because the bottom beam of either a left or right ramp option might skim the top of that. And so, it might need to be lowered 2 inches, it might be able to be, and plus we need to have the ramp design and approved before we can fix the 2 sides. That's been the holdup on that, but, the sides are very inexpensive repair.
We would deal with that situation as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just so you know, the funding has already been approved for both the ramp and those stairs. So it's not a question of getting additional funding. The funding is available. That was approved a year and a half ago or so.
Yep.
So that's not an issue. That once you decide what you want to do, they can move ahead with the project as quickly as possible.
So is it appropriate for us to vote on it?
I think that's why we'd like to
We'd
be
like you to
here
endorse
today, is
one,
to
yeah.
make sure we get endorsed by the commission
Okay.
on
Can
this
I ask,
option.
any further discussion on
I have
this?
something. Now, this isn't on the historic register. Am I correct in saying that?
No, it's not on the historic.
No. Something about the pointing when they, and
Yes.
will this affect our chances of getting it on the historic
No,
register?
and that's another, I'm glad you brought that up, it's a great question. And in looking at this and why my recommendation has led to the ramp option more so than a lift, is because there's no modification, there's no physical modification at that point to the building. Accessibility modifications are typically exempt from that anyway. And we are remaining cognizant of that when we do the repairs to the stairs. I'll sit with, before we move forward, we'll either reach out to the state or we'll work together to see, okay, what materials are we supposed to use there to make sure that any repairs moving forward doesn't preclude us from, trying to go that route again. There, on that same vein too, is and Rich has seen this, actually Rich pointed it out, is there, the building as a whole, we're starting to see some spalling masonry joints. So we want to make sure that when we go to fix those, we're using the appropriate materials. And if it means digging out whatever prohibited us from being on the register to begin with, maybe that's the time to do it, even if it's in a phased approach. So if there's an area that's worse than other areas, let's get rid of whatever made it so it wasn't eligible for the historic
It may not
register.
have been the material, it may have been the way it was done.
Yeah, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was mortar versus Portland cement, yeah. The typical mortar used today is not the same as would have been done when the building was originally constructed. Yeah. We did also, just so you know, we're doing repairs on the windows as we can. And, broken panes, we're leaving them, we're re-glazing them in, we're using the originals, and nothing's being changed that way or being proposed to be changed, so.
I think everybody's really appreciative to the way the interior was done too, because if we had, the only thing we wouldn't be able to change probably is the bathroom, but you could take out any of the
Yep.
interior walls because of the way they were placed based on the original interior. So I think everybody involved, all the help, the workers that worked there, and you and Ted with the designs and everything did a great job. So we're very fortunate because the commission doesn't want to see us having just buildings that we keep in town. We want them to have improved use and be part of the structure of the town. So this has really been beautiful.
Okay, so anybody want to discuss further approval of the ramp?
You want a motion?
Somebody
Make a motion.
Somebody second it? Okay, all in favor of approving the option to the building, to the ramp to the left?
Option one, okay.
Scheme one?
Thank you.
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Unanimous?
Great,
We approve the option of the ramp to the left.
terrific,
Thank
thank you.
So much
Yep, well, thank you.
for access.
You want to move on to the next item?
Next item is
Grants.
discussion about grants about the historic townhouse.
So this is mostly informational. There may be one vote of endorsement we might ask for in the MHC grant. So let me walk through. Now Christina here, I've met Christina Katsarias, she's assistant to the town administrator. So there are two chunks of grants we want to talk about. First one I want to talk about is ARPA, which is the big federal, was passed early last year, the American Rescue Plan Act. A lot of money involved. The town share, the town gets two tranches of revenue. We get direct funding from the federal government. It's total about $1.2 million. You can use that mostly within certain restrictions to what we want to use it for, mostly capital type work, and this would enhance community at large, things like that. There's also a chunk of money that we're receiving from Plymouth County, which is more restricted. So there was money awarded by the federal government to counties and localities. The money that went to the counties, there was a lot of money went to Plymouth County. And they divided up proportionally what the different towns within Plymouth County would get. The amount that we got, that we've been told we're going to be awarded is a little over $2 million, about $2,077,294. Of that amount, $1.7 million is restricted, and the primary ARPA restrictions mean pandemic recovery. Premium pay for public safety employees, broadband, water, and sewer. Those are most of the things. And economic recovery, they call it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Lakeville economically is not considered a distressed area. So we're a little tighter in what we can use it for. Now there's a portion, in addition to the 1.7, 362,000, that, excuse me, I'm cold, that Plymouth County is allocating out as under the revenue replacement category, which is just a sort of nomenclature that the federal government adopted. We're up to $10 million of whatever anybody's received can just be claimed as revenue replacement. You can use it for most of what you want, which is how we're able to use our 1.2 million most of the way we want to. So the town has applied for a number of projects. Of the direct funding piece, there was some money put towards a water feasibility study, and that's the study that was used to develop a larger project, which we applied to the county for, which I'll talk about in a moment. We set aside $100,000 for vaccination and testing, things like that, just in case you need it. You may have heard that $20,000 in ARPA money was put toward the outdoor stage cover, which is a project which is about to get underway. $44,785 was given to the Parks Commission for renovation of the tennis courts at Ted Williams. And just recently the board approved $170,000 to restore the Gamache playground and renovate that. The board also directed us to take that $170,000 and apply to the county, see if we get it to the county, which would in turn save us, free up some money that we would have otherwise. So we're waiting to hear back on that. To the county, we've applied for 3 projects. $332,800 under the restricted category, and that's for the water and sewer improvements. Now that's bringing water and sewer to a number of locations, mainly parks, but also the historic library and to the Old Town Hall. This allows us to bring the water and sewer to those locations, septic to those locations. Unfortunately, the county ruled that, and again, I don't agree with this, but this is what they're doing, that you can put in water and sewer, but you can't put in bathrooms with that money. Makes no sense to me. Literally, they're saying you have a pipe to the location, but you can't do anything with it, unless you pay for it yourself. However, they did also tell us that we can apply for the restroom idea at Old Town Hall using the revenue replacement category, so we've done so. Now, the budget for that is quite generous. It's about $183,000. That's probably more than we're going to need. But the idea was, when that was put together, was to provide any possible contingency. And that would mean either building one indoors, or building a structure adjacent, or anything along those lines. And part of, we're not at the point now where we have a preferred option to give you, because the county has not approved the project yet. So we haven't done any design work. So we're going to be coming back to you once we have a preferred design, to ask for your endorsement on that design. So that's where that'll be. And then lastly, the third project was Gamache Playground, which we applied for Plymouth County for. And as I said, if we get that we won't be using that with the direct funding money. So that's the ARPA overview. There are other projects that we're looking at. The Parks Commission's, I believe, is about to come forward with a plan for the new fields. And there's some other ideas that they have as well, as we talk about some more Clear Pond Park, that kind of thing. And we are, open to concepts and ideas as they come along. It is a limited amount of money, but it is a very useful resource, especially the stuff especially the money that was awarded directly to the town, because it's so much flexibility in how we can use it. So, have any questions about that?
Is any one of these projects have anything to do with the roof at the historic town?
Next topic. So that's a nice segue. Thank you. So in the capital budget approved several years ago was $30,000. So as I said, I think it was more as a placeholder, but it was appropriated by town meeting for replacement of the roof at Old Town Hall. That's probably not enough, especially there's some other work that should be done to that if we can. However, it came to our attention last year that the MHC has a grant, which is a 1-for-1 match that would allow that on properly designated buildings can be applied toward a capital project, mainly restoration, right?
Yeah, so it's overall building preservation, building
maintenance.
code compliance. Yes, so routine maintenance is not allowed, and nor is like any upgrades to mechanical systems, like
Right.
heating or plumbing or anything like that, air conditioning, electrical.
But
Anything
an outdoor
like that.
stabilization project would probably be considered very good way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the reason for, if you recall, a town meeting this past
November.
fall, was it fall
Yeah.
timing? Fall town meeting. There was an article approved which declared a historic easement on that property. That was a prerequisite for the MHC grant. We looked to apply for it last year. We found, that designation never happened, so we weren't able to apply for it. So this year we are. And you want to talk a little about that?
Sure. So so the article that was passed at town meeting would allow the Mass Historical Commission to put a preservation restriction on the old town hall if the grant funding is awarded. So the article that was passed in November does not by itself create a preservation restriction. So the MHC would do that, with the consent of town meeting, which we got in November. Our intention is at the very least to apply for a 1-to-1 match, so it would be a $30,000 grant application. The maximum grant request for the MHC is $100,000. So if there are more resources sort of available internally, and there are, if there's a project that's, that exceeds that $60,000, we could look at
It
it.
is eligible, there's CPA.
Yep.
Which the grant, we're not at the point now of applying for something, but if we applied for an MHC grant for something more, then if we had a stabilization budget, then we could certainly look at applying for CPA funding the upcoming round.
It is probably worth mentioning that this is it's a reimbursed grant,
Right.
so we would have to show that we have 75% of
Right.
the funding, and then we would be reimbursed for what we pay later.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So our intention was to apply to the MHC for a $30,000 grant, which would give us a total of $60,000 to replace the roof.
Right. It should be sufficient.
At the Old Town Hall. But part of the reason that we're here today is because that application does require a letter of support from you all. So so we all need to be on the same page.
Okay.
And that's for a shingled roof, which would be wood shingled as opposed to asbestos.
Yeah, so that's something that we talked about a little bit last year when we looked into submitting the application last year. Yes, so it would be I don't know what the terminology is, but
It's all right. We'll work that out with you guys. I know when we first looked at it, I looked at Macris and it called out asphalt roofing on the submittal to the state, which I was kind of surprised to see. but then it was converted back from the asphalt to the original wood shingles. And so the only thing we need to figure out is whether it's gonna be white or red cedar shingles. And I would obviously recommend red cedar shingles, provided
Right.
It was red when
Yeah,
it was done.
We
last
put up
time.
red shingles,
Yeah.
red cedar the last time.
it'll, yeah.
So we can certainly stipulate that's our intention, yeah.
I just would like to mention this so that if people are listening, the Old Town Hall is on the National Register of Historic Buildings. So we think it's very important to preserve it.
And that's actually one of the prerequisites for the MHC grant, isn't it? That has to be on the on the register, on the
I-
state register?
It has to be on the state,
State
so when we went
register.
through this
State
last year, I
register.
think it said that it had to be on the
Same time,
state
yeah.
register, and then when we looked into this, I think you explained to me that if it's on the state register, then it is also on
Right.
the national
I
register.
believe there are
Is
only
that
2
correct?
properties in
First,
Lakeville.
you have to be on the
reverse.
state,
Right.
you have to be on the state first.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you apply for national register designation, and they did.
Okay,
So it's only one of 2 areas in town, the other is the Royal Wampanoag Cemetery,
Yeah, that's what I thought, there
which
were
is
2
not a
sites.
structure, but
Right,
yeah.
okay.
we only have 2.
So, okay. Any discussion on a letter of recommendation as requested? A vote? Somebody make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we send a letter of recommendation.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Unanimous?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll work with, make sure the language
Yes,
is
so
what they need.
the application is not due until the middle of March. It is quite an elaborate application, so we'll be working on it probably right up until then. But if it's helpful for myself, for anyone else to prepare a draft, and then, you can amend at will, we can certainly work on that.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
What else?
Anything else?
that's it, right?
Mr. Chairman, Larry, and Dave, actually, having to do with the bathroom at the Old Town Hall, I think it's important for the Historical Commission to have a discussion before we get too far down here in the process.
Yeah.
Whether they want it inside the building or outside the building. There's a lot of negatives about the outside of the building, so I do think they should talk about that soon.
Yeah, I think I indicated when I said I was going to come to you with some alternatives, that's what we were thinking, was that we wouldn't move forward with anything until we have to have some preliminary concepts put together, which we don't have the money to do until the county approves the project. But that being the case, once we do and we start moving forward, there'll be a point where we don't plan to come to the commission with a predetermined outcome. We don't plan to do that. We're going to come to the
No,
commission.
I understand
with
that,
alternative,
but I'm just saying it's a good idea just
Yeah.
to have them discuss it among themselves and say, oh, we don't want an outside one.
Right, that's fine.
You
Yeah.
know, we want the inside one, where would the inside one be located, and so forth and so on. That's just my point, so everybody's not wasting a lot of time, later. If they talk about it now and say, well, we're gonna put a building outside, that doesn't make sense, but that's me, I should.
Well, we had a discussion here, I think, that the county wants to see no indoor sewage.
No, some of the different grants were funded, which would give you money for sewage and water, but would not give you money to put a bathroom in.
Right.
But there are other grants that you might be able to get.
Okay.
Yeah, we're using a different sort, yeah, it's a different section of the same bucket. I don't know how else to
So
put
that
it.
clarifies.
Yeah, but yeah, there's also, I think a discussion to be had as to where, if it's inside, where to put it. I get, off the top of my head, and but you all know a lot more about it than I do probably with this building. I can think of 2 or 3 different places I could see where you could put a bathroom. So,
Excuse me, I'm not being rude, I gotta go to my granddaughter's band concert.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
So, there's a lot of discussion to be had on this. I'm just hoping that the county comes through with what, as they promised, and gives us this project. So,
I don't know if you realize it or not, but years ago, there was a plan to lift the building up and put a
Yes,
full
I've heard that.
cellar
Yes, we had
underneath
talked
it
about that
with a
years ago.
bathroom and an exterior entrance and everything, and it never passed town meeting, so that was a long time ago.
that would have been something, wouldn't it?
That way-
So it's gonna be
It would
lifted
have
up on,
been easy
lifted up on
because
stilts and then
of the
put,
way it's built to do it.
you know, were you around during that one?
I
Well,
remember that,
yeah.
yeah. but-
Yeah, I was somewhat involved in all that, way back.
I mean, honestly, there is a reason why, I mean, $183,000 is a lot of money for a bathroom. But there's a reason why that number is filled with so many different contingencies, because we really don't know how this is all gonna play out. And when it comes to, you know as well as anybody, that when it comes to putting in a modern amenity in a historic structure, it's just more expensive to do it
Yes.
right.
Right.
So we wanna make sure we have the money for it.
Plus, the building we do have on response AC and heat, but it's for limited use. So the water
bathroom would-
coming into the building,
Yeah.
if we have temperatures like tomorrow, you would have problems with pipes and things.
That's
So
true.
that's all that has to be considered.
Yeah.
And
So I think there's probably a lot of mitigation that have to take place, insulation on the,
There's
things
no
like that, yeah.
insulation.
I know, I'm saying on the, you know, on
Exterior
the
Piping
water
or
pipe,
something.
probably, or that area of exterior walls or something, I don't know. It is potentially, if we keep doing this work with the building, it's kind of a game changer in terms of making it just available as a public amenity. And I think that's just wonderful. I mean, one of the arguments that I made when trying to push the county forward on this bathroom was that it really is we also make it the bathroom will become available for, arts festival, things like, for
Early
events and all.
voting.
Yeah, early voting, all those things, yeah.
What, if this bathroom is to be built, does it have to be attached or to the building?
this is one of the decisions we
It's one of the
have.
decisions you'll be making.
Because if we just build it outside and then in the winter time, the winter months, flush the line so that it's not, and turn it off.
Yeah,
How many
this is why we wanted to come to you with some ideas,
Right,
because,
I
it's
mean,
just,
how
it's
many
just,
people
yeah.
will be using it in the
Yeah.
winter time?
Honestly, I think the $183,000 number, one of the reasons it was designed that way was that it was intended to make it possible, if we had to, build an exterior structure to do so.
I think that would
So.
be more,
I think it's a judgment, I think it's a valued discussion we need to have, yeah.
We have heat and air conditioning in there now.
Mhm.
One thing we're missing is insulation in the
Right.
walls.
Right, yeah, yeah. Fortunately, the MHC grant wouldn't do that.
No.
Might be able to find some other ways to do that, though.
Yeah, we couldn't do
Yeah.
it through the MHC grant, but
Yeah.
we could look at other grant opportunities.
Yeah, we are very engaged and interested and willing in making that building into a useful building.
All right, I have a question in regards to the historic district concerning the old town hall in this area.
Mhm.
I think New Bedford has a historic district
Yeah.
study committee.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about them, or how, they're a standing committee?
I don't.
Because we
I'm
have
just trying
discussed-
to rack my brain if I dealt with them at all, but I
Okay,
don't remember.
we have
that.
discussed possibilities of other historic districts in the town.
Yeah,
Not definitely planned, but to be considered. And that committee would be the one that, works on that kind of project.
so as part of the research that we talked about at the beginning of the meeting, we'll get into that. I will reach out to Ann Lauro in New Bedford and get some, to try to download her brain a little bit in terms of how they do things there. I don't think we necessarily want to replicate New Bedford and Lakeville, but I think there are some things that they certainly have a lot of experience dealing with historic preservation. And maybe we can gain something from that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other business, any other comments? Okay, a motion to adjourn, a second,
A second.
all in favor? We're adjourned.